Today's guest is Gwendolyn Young, who is a true business boss, who, after a 15-year corporate career, went on to start her own company, so she'd have all the freedom to manage her lupus condition. Now at the helm of Your Virtual Admin Expert, a multi-six-figure results-driven agency of professional administrative problem solvers, she brings her full spectrum of expertise to lead the company and the clients to success. So, Gwendolyn, thank you very much for being on. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
You are very welcome. So I'd love to get a little bit more background on you and kind of like I know why you started the business, and oftentimes, especially with a lot of people that I work with and interview on here or coach on here, it oftentimes starts with like that idea of like your mess becomes your message, right? Like something kind of bad happened and now that's kind of turned into this other thing that is actually really good. So I'd love for you to just
Yeah.
kind of add to that and give us a little bit of context.
Yeah, sort of kind of like you said, I was not the person who wanted to become an entrepreneur, believe that or not. Most people don't. I was in corporate America, loved corporate America. I was going to be the girl to crush the glass ceiling. At least that was the dream. And in 2013, got a diagnosis of systemic lupus, and that kind of altered that journey, right? And so I had to come off of that corporate job, really just focus on my health. And during that time of recovery, I just said, you know what? I don't want to go back. I don't believe that I have to choose between doing work that I love and taking care of myself. I felt that there was a way that I could do both. And that's literally how your virtual admin expert was born. And so I said, I wonder if people in the virtual space need operations and administrative support, and started to do some research because I am a person that loves to learn. And I found that there was this whole entire industry that people had been working from home for like a decade, and they just never told me about it. So I just went heads down, all in, put up a makeshift website, start putting up job profiles, telling everybody this is what I did. And 6 months later, I got my nun family member paying client.
Always a good thing when that happens. Yes.
I do.
I
I
totally
always
agree.
say, because my mom was my first paying client, but I'm like, she's my mother. She's gonna support anything that I do. So I like to let people know that, like, for me, it wasn't instant. I know some people have those stories where they're like, oh, I quit my job and then I got a client in 30 days. That was not me. 6 months later, I got my first client. She lived in Florida, and we started to work together over the internet, and it just kind of blossomed from there. And then 10 years later, here we are. We are a small agency of administrators who love to work with entrepreneurs across the globe.
Love it. And I actually love the fact that you're not glossing over the messy middle of like, oh yeah, like it was just all rainbows and sunshine when I started, which is never the case. Like I literally
God,
think
no,
that
that
that's
was
more the
not my
exception.
journey.
Yeah, 100%. So thank you for the honesty you're bringing to this. Okay, so then yeah, I'd love to dive into kind of why you're here. I know before the recording and in the submission of to like be here, you talked about, okay, so I have some reservations with regards to sales. Like I don't like feeling that like icky feeling when I actually sell. I don't want to convince anybody. And there's this like suspicion of, I know there's probably layers into that, but also like maybe it's just a perspective. So why don't you give me some more background about why you chose sales, the thing to dive into on here, then we can take it from there.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think one of the questions that really kind of resonated when I thought about this was like, what is that thing that's kind of keeping you stuck? And from kind of crushing through to that next level within your business. And for me, like, I know that it's sales, right? Like, I am amazing at what I do. And I am perfectly comfortable being the person behind the scenes that you never have to know that I am the amazing person behind the scenes doing what I do. But I know in order to grow this business to the next level, that is not going to be possible, right? And so figuring out what does sales look like for me? Um, because what I relate to sales in terms of what I've seen and what I've experienced is not something that feels good for me. And I'm like, I'm not doing it. So, like, first of all, I think there's this issue around it feels like you're just like begging somebody to work with you. And yeah, I'm not going to do that.
Got it. Okay. So you mentioned this is, and again, I'm using my words to reflect back, so let me know if the words don't resonate with you, but it feels like this is in some ways a bottleneck to the growth of your business, right? Like you said, I
Yes.
want to go to the next level, but there's something standing in the way.
Yes.
So, okay, perfect. So why did you choose or see sales as the bottleneck, right? Because like you could hire out a salesperson. You obviously have a team right now, so you know how to like manage people. So why do you
Yes.
feel like sales is actually the bottleneck and not something else?
Because I feel like it's the one thing that needs to happen that we are not currently doing enough of, right? So we've got the foundation set operationally, we're fine. You standard operating procedures, we got that. Like we can easily bring a VA into our business and quickly put them with a client, right? We can easily onboard a client and jump into their business and start working with them. All of those pieces are already in place, right? Those are things that we've worked on and we've perfected. It's the selling piece where we have to be telling people that we are here. This is what we do. This is what makes us amazing. That is the thing that needs to be said more and more of that we're not doing enough of. And yeah, you could hire a salesperson, right? But then it's that whole thing of how does that work? Right. And will they sell in a way that I think feels good for us as an agency, as a brand, right? Can I trust that person to do that? How do you pay these salespeople to do that? Like it's all of these different elements that you have to figure it out. Like I've seen it work for programs, but not necessarily a service-based business. So I guess
Got it.
the connection for me is not there yet.
Got it. Okay. So what is your history with like sale? Like have you gotten any formal training on sales? Have you invested in like this is how
No,
you do a proper sales? Like okay, so
I have
nothing.
not. No, no,
Okay. Perfect. Okay.
no.
So then do you think this is more of a skill gap? Like I just maybe haven't invested in the training for sales? Or is it more of a I just don't feel comfortable selling what I do? Like what resonates more for you?
I definitely don't think it's a skills gap, right? Because I love what I do. I can talk about it all day. I don't know that it's talking about it. I think it's how do you do it, right? Like I love to have conversations with people. And maybe I'm looking at sales in the wrong way. I'm thinking of sales in this high pressure tactic, in your face, constant, buy, 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 buy. And that doesn't resonate with me. Right? I'm not the shopper that you need to follow around the store and ask a million questions. I'm the shopper where I want to browse and I want to learn. I want to have a conversation with you. And then I'm going to decide if I move forward, right? How do I incorporate that into the way that I sell our services? Because I don't want to be the sending you 25,000 emails. I don't want to be sending you 25,000 phone calls. I don't want to do 25,000 follow ups to get you to say yes because I want you to be invested as well, right? This is something that you need, you see the value. Um, I don't want to do that high pressure. Like I've literally been on a call with someone and I've seen the person pressuring them so much that they just pulled out their credit card and the credit card just kept declining and the person just kept asking them, "Oh, well we should just lower it by what, $100 and it'll go through?" And then they just kept trying and trying until they got to a number that worked. And I was cringing. I was just like, that doesn't feel integral to me. I
Yeah,
don't want to sell that way. And I don't want to be sold to that way. Does that
110%.
make any sense at all?
I mean, I'm on the same page as you with regards to selling that way and all of this stuff. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's not an integrity thing. The clients you are going to get are going to be reactive clients. I don't agree with that sentiment at all. And I appreciate where you are coming from because you want to do it from a place of power in that,
Yes.
hey, like these people, they want this, they understand that I'm the expert to get them done.
Yes.
That's a beautiful close. So yes. So you seem to have a lot of clarity on how you want to sell
Yes.
or at least maybe what you don't want. So, like when you are talking about this, I don't really get a sense of like, okay, well, she's not really clear on what this might even look for her, like look like for her. one of the things you did say was, okay, well, what I really have trouble with maybe isn't sales. Definitely, I know I don't want high pressure sales, but what I have trouble with is saying a lot of stuff about like this is what makes us amazing. This is when I'm talking about what we do. I feel like that's like the missing piece. So when I hear that, I'm hearing under the surface, there's some hesitation to like be visible, be in the fullest expression of like your magnificence and the amazing things you do. So does any of that resonate for you? And if not, then tell me more about what you meant by that.
That absolutely resonates.
Okay, cool.
And I think you hit it on the head with that. Um, it's and you're bringing up some childhood things that I remember, right? And so maybe there's some emotional pieces there that I need to kind of tackle. But it was like I was always the girl where it was like, who does she think she is? Right? Like to be smart, to be all these things. Who does she think she is? Where does she get that from? Why does she this? Why does she that? And so I even remember in corporate, right? One day walking down the hall and I had this, I love colors if you can't tell, Jessica, with my green on. And I
I
had
had
this
an inkling, a
beautiful
suspicion that it might be a thing, but yeah.
this beautiful like pink very vibrant pink sweater on, and someone turned around to me and said, you really need to tone it down. And I think from that is where it's just like, oh, okay, people really don't want to see or hear you in your full authentic self, and that could definitely have a little bit to do with it.
Okay,
So I see it as like bragging. I guess people think it's bragging on yourself when it's really just I've just helped people do some amazing things and I'm glad to be a part of it.
got it. Okay. So is that a connection that you have known about before, or is that like you're hearing it a different way, or it's brand new for you right now? Like, where are you at with that realization?
I've considered it before. I
Okay.
think right now I am making the connection to how it's preventing me from showing up.
Okay. And how would you verbalize that?
Probably just like that. Like it's why I don't fully embrace or talk about the amazing work that we do or the amazing things that we've done, even myself specifically with how I've helped clients, because yeah, it's just like I don't want the people to think that I'm bragging. It's just like these are real things that I've helped people do and I think they're amazing.
Right. So I don't want to do high pressure sales because that's just not who I am. But I also don't feel safe and secure internally to brag and highlight the facts of how amazing we are. So then I'm stuck in this limbo of a revenue ceiling that I know can be broken by sales.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Beautiful
You hit it
hamster
on
wheel
the
to be
head.
on and not go anywhere. Yes. And I know I'm joking, but it happens all the time. And
No,
that's what's
but yeah, and that's what it is. So it's kind of like this whole I'll say a little bit, then it's like, okay, no, that's too much.
right. So I think the first thing is just zoom out a little bit to kind of make this more concrete. Do you have a bottleneck problem or do you actually have a hamster wheel problem?
I have a hamster wheel problem. I don't think I have a bottleneck problem.
Good. So I
Yeah.
think that's the first piece of clarity
Yeah.
because initially we started with like, okay, well, sales is the bottleneck to my business.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, well,
But it's really not.
actually, the reason it
I see
looks like a
that now.
bottleneck is because I keep circling around the same thing that I don't actually want to address, which is there is a part of me that is really, really not safe, does not feel secure to go out and express, to be visible, to be
Yes.
authentically like in my power publicly, etc. Why? Because, who does she think she is,
Yeah.
etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
So in that way, sales seems like is as actually the consequence of this inner, like I haven't healed this yet, not the real issue. Like you're seeing it manifest in sales, but
Mm,
it's not actually the real issue. So
got
does
you.
that
Okay. That makes
really
sense.
that makes sense? Okay, perfect.
That
So
makes
again,
sense.
Is that something that's new, or is this a connection you're kind of making now?
Yeah, this is kind of a connection that I'm making right now in that, right? Because it's like you said, I can see now sales really isn't the bottleneck. It's me not showing up is the bottleneck, and it's not even the bottleneck, it's the hamster wheel. I don't show up because of this fear of what it may look like on the other side to people.
Correct. So if that's clear and if that makes sense to you and it resonates with you, what we want to do now is zoom out and be like, okay, well, I can kind of see the pieces. So now we want to kind of zoom out and be like, okay, well, what problems does this actually create in my business? So tell me, like sales is the umbrella of that, but how is it actually specifically manifesting as a problem for you? The lack of expression, the lack of visibility, like how is that actually manifesting into a specific problem in your business?
Yeah, so because it limits clients,
Okay, so in
it
what way?
we don't get new clients if we're not selling, if we're not visible, if we're not talking about how we help people solve problems, then it impacts our ability to get more clients, right? To constantly bringing clients on. And we have some amazing clients, but to also get more, right?
Mhm.
To kind of, I guess, throw fuel on the pipeline. That's one, which then impacts revenue, right? Like I'm super clear on where it goes, because if we're not constantly bringing in clients, we're not growing the revenue either, which means we don't grow the team either, because there's no funding to grow the team. And
Right.
then there's no people to support the clients. So it's this constant, again, hamster wheel of, if you don't do this, then these things are not going to happen either.
Got it. Okay. So that's kind of the ripple effects of all of this, right? But the
Yes.
first problem it actually creates is, well, the pipeline isn't really moving that quickly at the start,
Yes,
meaning like there's
as
not
we would
enough
like it
people
to move.
coming in.
Yes, there's
Okay.
not enough people coming into the pipeline.
Okay. So let's just, okay, I'm gonna write that one down. So the other part, and the reason I'm always like zooming in, zooming out is sometimes it just helps people to see how this indirect thing is actually creating kind of like
Oh, a
when I
very
started this
big
whole
thing.
podcast, it's like me problems become business problems, right? And I want that
Yes,
connection to be clear. So that's the only reason why I'm constantly zooming in, zooming out. So just so you're aware. So if the first part of it is, well, okay, my hesitation to be visible is not feeding the pipeline from the front. Okay, if you move down the pipeline, when you do actually have to get to the sales call, now, because there's a lack of visibility, okay, that person that's coming in relatively cold to you, what do you think the problems arise at that stage?
well, see, that's the thing. That's the key. We don't get a lot of cold traffic, right? Our traffic is warm.
Hmm.
So they've already heard about us from a current client or a previous client or a friend who's worked with me or done some work. So that's the other side to that. So because our business has been largely referral based, probably about 90%, we get very little cold traffic. When we do get cold traffic, they've already had an experience with me somehow. Either they heard me on the podcast or they followed my social media or something like that. But just like complete cold traffic, rarely ever have had complete cold traffic.
Perfect. So, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, that is a good spot to be in because if you solve the cold traffic problem, you now have not a hamster wheel, but actually a flywheel in terms of how that can grow quickly.
Yes.
So it's kind of like that's the potential that you have here. The other part of it too is like, because we started this whole call with you being concerned about high pressure sales.
Yes.
So
I
if the
don't like it.
pipeline is dry at the beginning because you as the leader hesitate from your own history to be visible, to be seen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the people coming in, if they're not from referrals, because it's not really a scalable thing, but if they're coming
Right.
in without a lot of knowledge about you, then now this is where you're at odds. It's like, well, this person doesn't really know how magnificent I am. I can't convince them in one call, which makes sense that I am. So then it's kind
Right.
of like it seems like the only alternative is this high pressure sales thing. So now there's going to be a part of you that's going to avoid that tactic to begin with, because I don't want to be the high pressure
Yeah.
person. But like, do you see how now that's like a chicken before the egg problem, right? Like you're not actually nurturing your magnificence so that when you come to the sales call, it's like, oh man, like I know this person. It was just a confirmation that like they are how they say they are. So like, does
Yeah.
that connect with you or not? Like the need for the high pressure sales is in some ways also related to the visibility or not? Like what lands for you there?
Yeah. Yeah. See, not like I'm never like that's just not gonna resonate with me. Like I don't want any part of the high pressure sales.
Yeah,
And could that be a potential where it keeps us from closing the deal? Possibly. This is the first time, I'm gonna sit and think through that, right? Like I'll sit with that after this. But for me, I like to have conversations with people. So when we're on the call, face to face, one on one, like I have absolutely no issue showing up. Like I can show up and I can tell you about how we've helped clients do X, Y, and Z, right? Like we've gotten clients 40K in 30 days from accounts receivables that they couldn't collect, right? I can tell you how we've got VAs on the team who've saved 20 hours of time for CEOs, getting them out of their calendar and travel. Like I can tell you about that when we're on face to face. I think the trick for me, the not the trick, but the problem for me is getting you into my sphere, I
got it.
guess.
So
So
that's a
how do
really
I get
important.
you in?
Well, okay, so there's two things there. So number one, I think it's a really important distinction because what you're just revealing there is when I get you into my world one on one, I can actually show my magnificence.
Yes,
I got no issues doing it there.
none.
Okay. That's extremely important. Why? Because that means when I have filtered and am able to control the interaction. So like you
Yes,
are in my space now, I brought you in. I've
yes,
somehow like my nervous system in some ways has like said you are safe because you're coming to me.
yes,
Now I got nothing to worry about. But it's when I have to go out publicly
yes,
where I don't control the wild, wild west of the internet.
yes.
That's where the freak
It
out happens.
yeah, it gets a little haywire.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So then again, it goes back to the pipeline at the beginning
Yes,
because a part of me hesitates to be out there and
visible.
visible. That's also the real, let's say the hamster wheel
The
bottleneck.
hamster wheel.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So again, something that's new, something you're aware of. Where do you land with that reflection?
Um, I think that's a new awareness. Like I knew there was a little bit of that showing up. I guess I didn't really make that distinction like, oh yeah, once you come into my world, we're good. It's that being out publicly, speaking in front of people, getting on a stage,
Yeah.
um, networking events, right? I'm gonna find a corner of that event. I make, find that person I can connect with, but to literally like just be out, that piece is still like, okay. But I'm challenging myself to do that differently this year, which
Perfect.
is why I'm here with you.
Perfect. Love it. Love it. And congratulations for doing like steps like this to do that. So that was actually the other place that I wanted to get into, which is looking at, okay, so what is your approach to actually solving this, right? So one is because I'm going to put myself in uncomfortable situations. That's always
Yes.
going to be part of it. So congratulate you
Yes.
for that. And you also had mentioned, okay, this is probably due to some sort of childhood things where, there was some stuff that happened and there's a history around it, etc. So is that something you've ever like looked into healing or reconciling in the context of business or no?
Not in the context of business, no.
Okay. So kind of more interpersonal, personal, I've kind of dealt
Yes.
with it that way.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So why do you think solving it in these other interpersonal areas hasn't translated into the business area?
Now that is a good question. I think it's because it's not really fully resolved, right? Like I don't think it's fully been eliminated. I still think there's still a little hint of that left of what are people going to say? How are
Mhm.
people going to react? How are people going to respond when you put it out there publicly?
So, A, good awareness that yes, this is actually not something. It's like we can celebrate everything that got us to this point, but this is really a discussion about where my business wants to go and the leadership
Yes.
that it's going to require needs more or deeper work than the work that I've done so far. So I always want to like
Yes.
create that nuance that like it's you can celebrate the work that you've done and know that this is a part of the leadership evolution of how you're going to show up in your business. It just
Yes.
this wasn't needed prior to this point. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, when you describe kind of my approach towards this, or like, yeah, I think the part that I haven't eliminated is like, I'm not really sure what people are going to say, etc. So what I want to like reflect back to you is like, look at where your brain is going to. Like it's going to, well, if I can control what other people say, if I can, right? It's like it's recreating the same sales pipeline issue that we identified before. It's going
That's,
outside
yeah.
into a place where I don't control, but like, let's imagine that I can. So let me pick the rooms that are small enough that I can feel safe. Let me find the corner that I can
Mm,
feel, you know what I mean? So like the
that's
very
good.
nature of how your brain is defaulting to solving this problem is constantly going to put you in essentially
Back
playing
into the
small.
same hamster wheel.
Correct. It's going to look different every time. It's going to feel like progress every time because it's different. So like we get that novelty hit, but it's fundamentally the same because the
Yeah.
thing is, you can't actually control what some random internet troll is going to say when you're like, got this person $40,000. Like, oh, well, you stole that money. Or, like somebody's going to say some stupid stuff. Right. So if you want the leadership to rise to the level of the business that you want, it's like you like your sales or sorry your growth edge here is actually I got to be okay with the fact that I can't control the world
Right.
but I'm still actually safe. So what aligns with you there?
That was actually a really good clarity moment for me. I didn't see that before because when you said that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what happens. Because I'll get into bigger rooms, right? And then I'm still kind of looking for that
Yeah,
safe
you'll
spot
find the smallest corner in the biggest room.
in the biggest room.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I didn't like that, just kind of came to light to me when you said that. So I'm like, huh, you might be onto something.
Not my first rodeo, so yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's a good
so
awareness for me.
good. I'm glad to hear that because this is how so a big part of like the work that I do is ultimately I help entrepreneurs like eliminate the profit and time leaks that come from these essentially inner
Yeah.
problems, right? So just to give you an example there, because I've seen it with other clients that have these visibility issues, that whole premise of like I find the smallest corner in the biggest room. So look at now how your brain's going to justify that. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna invest in this big mastermind. I'm gonna pay for like the VIP seats
Yeah.
at this whole conference, right? So I'm gonna invest all of this money that on the outside looks like I'm doing something to solve this problem. People will celebrate me for doing it. Maybe
Yes.
somehow I'll bump into somebody who like introduced me to the right person. I'll justify the ROI. There might even be real ROI. But you see like how fundamentally all we're doing is just we're moving the finish line of
Yes.
like am I actually eliminating the patterns that are
No.
authentically getting me to step into my leadership, or am I just, again, making more hamster wheels? So, and I'm
And
not, I know I'm talking to you, but I'm actually talking more broadly into like the patterns that I see. So don't think of this as judgment. I'm like, are you just wasting your money doing these things? You should still do all of
oh,
those things, but do them in a way that's aligned with the bigness that's already in there.
yes. No, that makes perfect sense to me. Like, I don't take that as judgment at all. I actually was sitting and thinking about a recent event where it was typically that, and there was opportunity to show up bigger, right? And I didn't do that. And so, no, I'm taking this all in. That it makes perfect sense to me.
Okay, perfect. So I know I've kind of been talking at you, at least for this last little bit. So why don't you reflect back to me, like how do you define the problem that is in front of you right now?
Um, yeah, so I need to like I still have some work to do on that, and I never looked at that in relation to like me as the CEO. It was really more so just as kind of me as this human, right? But not really in terms of my business and CEO and the impact it may be having there. Um, And I did not realize how I was showing up at events. So that is going to change immediately. The one thing about me is I'm not afraid. That you probably know that because I said yes to coming on this show. But I love a good challenge. And so I'm going to do that differently now because I know what the issue is. And so for me, it's always important to have a goal. And so once I put the goal, then my mind goes to how do I attain this goal? How do I get there? What are the things that I need to do? And if I have concrete things that I can do and conquer, then I can knock it out of the park um, every time. And so for me, that's how I process. So now I'm thinking, okay, when I do have the next event, what am I going to do differently? How am I going to show up differently? When I go to create content now, how can I show up differently? How can I show up bigger? How can I show up more in my authentic self? And how do I just release this of what people are going to think? Because they could think it's amazing, right? I could be missing out on all the people who think it's amazing. And so I'm going to just have to do it.
Yeah. Well, you are missing out on the people that think it's amazing. So that's actually already happening. That's in the opportunity cost of like
Yeah.
this piece. I know we haven't gotten into that, but yes, that is happening already. Um, the other part too that's really cool with you is like you're very action oriented. Like as soon as
Yes.
like I'll point out like a reflection, be like, oh yeah, so I can take this action. Like, I just need to do it. Cool. That is a beautiful part of the transformation of all of these things. And when you look at this problem, okay, this whole visibility, kind of playing small, shrinking, etc. To what degree is that an action problem? Or to what degree is it an emotional or mental problem for you?
It's more emotional, mental. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
So
more emotional,
how
mental.
so? Because all of your kind of like self goals were towards action.
Yes. But I have to work on the mental in order to get to the action, right? Like the
Hmm.
more that I do something, the better my mental becomes about it, right? It's the same thing when starting Pilates, which is probably a horrible example, but it was like, oh, I can't do that because I don't want to be in a room full of strangers when I can't lift or move a certain way, right? But then I was like, no, you just got to keep going. So I set the goal. I'm going to go 3 times a week. The more I show up, right? The more that noise in my head started to quiet. And before you know it, then it was like everybody in the room would become friends. And so
Hmm.
for me, it's very closely related because I talk to myself. It's a good thing, guys. Um,
100%.
with affirmations and things that I will say, I'm totally capable of doing hard things, right? This is a hard thing for me, but I can do this. The action is what helps me get over it. If I don't have an action to go with it, it's not going to stick for me, if
Perfect.
that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. So basically, the way you solve a lot of these types of problems is I outwork them.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So there's nothing wrong without work, right? So basically, like I generally the patterns that I see with entrepreneurs that'll have one of three main what I call out patterns with regards to overcoming challenges. So they'll either outwork whatever, the issue is. They will try to outlearn it. Like, let me just figure out like why should
Yeah.
I, have the visibility, etc. Or they try to outthink it,
Yeah.
right? Like if I can
I
see,
typically fall between outwork and outlearn, but I'm
okay,
done with outlearning. That I made a conscious decision this year. Like, I'm not gonna do another, like, I'm not doing another class, another course, another thing because I have so much stuff I just need to implement.
yeah,
Like, now it's time to do.
perfect.
So I'm done with the out learning.
Perfect. And that's good because shifting like the antidote to people that prioritize out learning is actually do more. Like generally when that begins to distort itself, then it's like enough, you're actually fearful of just taking the
Yes.
action, right? So
Yes.
that's it. So when it comes to individuals with the outwork pattern, okay, it's one of those where like it works until it doesn't.
Okay.
So here's an example, right? So you were saying, okay, well, I just got to do it enough until the fear goes away. So yes, I do agree with you. And the reason that that works is because over time you create more evidence that like this thing is safe at this level,
Yes.
right? So like for as lack of a better example, when I'm speaking in a room of 20 people that have been curated by somebody that I know and I'm speaking at their event, that's going to freak me out now. But if I do that enough, then I'll feel safe. But then as soon as I go to a room of 100 people, now I'm
I'm
freaked
freaked out
out
again. Yeah.
again. So now I have to basically exert a lot of energy to create enough evidence that this is actually safe.
Okay.
Okay. So before I go
That
on,
makes
like that,
sense.
does that
That makes
make
sense.
sense? That makes okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
that makes sense.
So I have nothing against that as an approach. It's just a very blunt approach generally. The reason being, there are parts of you because of your history that have made generally subconscious conclusions about your identity and what it means to be visible in it. So you can continue to kind of push your way through all of these things until you kind of create enough evidence to silence that voice and to nullify the fear that comes along with it.
Okay.
Or you can kind of get to the root. Okay, so what is this narrative? What is the emotion? What is the root cause of why I even have this? And if I can eliminate that, then all that's left is actually my authentic expression, right? So I can
Okay.
use my outwork to actually funnel into the highest expression that I have versus trying to overcome each individual step. So
Okay.
what lands for you with all of those?
I mean, it makes sense. Um, I guess you'll have to make the correlation for me to kind of what you think that is, because I think we know what the root is, right? It's that fear of what people might say or how people might respond or react.
Perfect.
Like
So,
to me, that's the root.
okay, perfect. So what people might say about you, okay, that's the root of it. So what might they say?
I I have no idea. They could
Perfect.
say anything.
And what does it mean if they say something negative about things that are factually true, but very like in your magnificence?
Say that again. I want to make sure I'm following you.
Yeah, yeah. So you go online, you go to some
Okay.
public forum, whatever, and you talk about how great you are
Okay.
and how you've done amazing things.
Okay.
And there are people that start to comment and be like, okay, you're just bragging, like you got to get out of here, like, or whatever it is that they say, but something along those lines.
Okay.
Okay. What does that mean for you internally?
I don't know. It depends on what is being said, right?
Okay.
Sometimes I can brush it off if if it's something super negative. If I think it's a personal attack,
Mhm.
then I internalize that.
Okay, so give me an example of, so like let's just say the same thing you mentioned before about, getting your clients like collections and saving them time. Like you say something like that and somebody says whatever is negative for you.
I don't see I don't typically lend to the negative piece. Like somebody has to say it or do it.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of what you give me a negative response to that.
So I think that's actually also important. So when asked for evidence, okay, so what is like the worst case scenario for your subconscious to hear? I don't even know. But I actually hesitate to show up because I don't even want to find out. Kind of like that,
Right.
that's actually the space. Like you can't even imagine the worst thing somebody would say because I just won't even show up where it's not safe.
So they don't say it. So there's no
They don't say it.
opportunity to
Right.
say
Like
it.
not knowing what they're going to say and never showing up to find out is actually a great way to stay in that small corner.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, of course, right?
I no, I that makes perfect sense.
Okay. So this is kind of like a pipeline thing. Like I don't even start so that I can see what the negative consequences actually are.
You want me to get out there so I can start to see. I know where you're going.
Well, that's part of it. I guess the other part that I'm going to is when you are observing your own hesitation to do this. What's the internal feeling?
I just don't want to deal with it.
Okay.
I just don't want to deal with it.
which
Like
means what?
I've seen people troll people. It's horrendous. Like I just don't want to deal with it. And I
Hmm.
don't want there to be a negative connotation with the work that I do and the brand that I've built
Hmm.
in any fashion.
Which is fine. And then you get to continue doing what you're doing
True.
because you're achieving that right now,
Yes.
right? So that problem's actually already solved,
I still don't like it though.
right? Well, that's kind of like pick your heart, right? Like if we're going to stay at that level of consciousness, or if we're going to stay at that level of perspective here, that's part of what's driving the hamster wheel.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
actually
I
getting
totally get it.
right. Okay. So when you go out and kind of explore the, like, I'm just going to do it, you're going to run
Hmm.
into these things. So then
Possibly, yes.
what's the feeling that
Great.
comes up for you there?
It's just gonna be that I don't like it, right? I don't like it. I don't know what's gonna come up until I know what's been said. It could be fear, it could be angry, it could be just this whole thing to revert back. I don't know.
Perfect.
I don't know until it's actually done.
That's fair. So if you imagine yourself authentically expressing in general, even in a context outside of business, what comes up for you imagining that?
Give me an example. What do you mean?
So like what does authentically expressing mean to you? Because that's the words you used earlier, though. That's why I'm repeating them back. So like what is like being out there authentically actually mean to you?
It's just being myself, who I am. Sometimes I'm loud, sometimes I'm not. I love color. I'm just live to my full expression, like of who I am. I'm a very direct person. I don't hold back. I'm gonna say what needs to be said. Sometimes that lands well, sometimes it doesn't. Depending on the expression I get back, I will just be like, okay, note to self, don't do that again. Um,
Got it. Okay. So then basically I gauge the room, like kind of what we were talking about before. Like I gauge the room and then
yes,
if it's safe,
it's
I
the same
will
exact way in
lean
my
into it
personal life. Yes,
or I shrink. Okay, perfect. So I
I'm
guess the
consistent
reason,
across the board.
yeah, yeah, no, no, that's actually a good thing. So I'll give you the breakdown, like why I'm asking you all of these questions, like
Okay.
the shrinking behavior, right? Like finding that smallest corner, right?
Yes.
That's basically the safety behavior. Like people have like fight or flight. This is more of a fawn type behavior, right?
Mm,
It's I'm not gonna run away. I'm gonna stay my ground. I'm definitely not gonna fight, but I'm going to like basically morph myself into what I need to be to just kind of exist and stay in this space. Like I will
okay.
acquiesce in some sort of way.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So if that is something you see across your whole life, right? Like I see it in personal, I see it in et cetera, et cetera. It's bred out of a history of finding safety, like in childhood through
Mm-hmm.
generally tumultuous circumstances. Like this is how I
Absolutely.
found how to navigate those.
Absolutely.
And it's now the default script that tends to run in any situation that your brain deems if I express here, I can't control the reaction of anybody else, which means the safest thing to do is
It's
to
not to
actually hold
express.
back. Correct.
Yeah. It's not to
Which you can push your way through with action. I guess my invitation to you is to consider that's going to work. It's going to require a lot of energy to constantly feed that,
yeah.
or you can basically heal the root of like, okay, well, why do I fawn? Why is that how I find safety? Right?
Okay.
That's really the invitation why I was asking you those things. And it's okay if it's
Yeah.
not clear yet, because like that's kind of where the healing lies to uncover and unpack that. But I'm just
Yeah.
kind of curious what lands for you from that discussion.
No, that makes perfect sense. And that's exactly what it is. So I'll have to sit with that to really kind of think through, yeah, why do I do that? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
But it's a perfect description of the what and how and the why. Yeah.
beautiful. Well, I know that's like a topic for a much deeper discussion that we would need
Yes,
to like dive
absolutely.
into.
We wouldn't
So
even have time to unpack that here today.
correct, right? That's kind of what I wanted to just make sure that at least understanding the kind of mapping out of what the patterns are, how it's affecting your sales, the
Yeah,
hamster, etc. Like
that's
at least
good.
does that feel complete for you? Was there still something?
No, 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 no. That feels really good. And that actually gives me something to sit with. Um, yeah, I didn't realize that's what it was. I don't think I've ever heard of fawn before. Fight and flight, but I don't think I've ever heard of fawn before. So thank you for giving me language for that because that's exactly what it is. Yeah, you
Perfect.
described it beautifully. I don't think I've ever heard anybody describe it quite that way. I don't even
Well,
know if people realize that's what I do though.
well, it's very hard to realize something that you don't realize yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you can't see it, you can't change it. That's why a big part of what I do is helping people first see it. Like I've said it many times on the podcast, like it's very hard to see the building when you're standing on the balcony.
Yeah.
So when you're in it every single day, you're on the balcony, you're exploring what's on there, and then somebody like me comes along, sees the whole building. It's like, well, hold on, like did you see all these other pieces, right? And
Yeah.
then not to mention just the emotions that drive that fawn response. Think about it, like you've practiced those for decades. So to
Yes.
you, they just feel like it's another day. Like,
It's
oh, it's
natural.
just
Yeah.
normal for me to go
It's
and
a
like
natural reaction.
correct, right? And then our brains will justify it after, oh, I'm just an introvert, or I don't really like what whatever the thing will come up as the justification for it. But again, it's when you look at it and you see the patterns, it's like, oh, this has nothing to do with sales directly. This
Yeah.
actually has to do with my own leadership and how I've reinforced a pattern for decades. And that's actually the limiting pattern because I'm at the helm of this business ship. So at the end of the day, the buck stops with me. So anyway, I don't want
Yeah.
that horse, but what lands for you with that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good, you know, kind of full circle to come back. And I think it's more so of dealing with those internal things, right? That internal emotion, those internal things that have happened. Um, could it be affecting my leadership? Yes. Um, do I think it's the thing that makes my leadership? I don't think so. But do I think it lands there and has some effect on it? Yes. And so that is something that I will need to deal with personally on a emotional level. And then I think we'll see the change in how I become more visible on the business side, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, totally agree. And I think that's an important distinction as well of like,
Yes.
is this my whole leadership? No, of course not, because you wouldn't
Right.
get to where you are like if it was.
Right.
It's what we came back to from the beginning of like where my business wants to go. Like if that pipeline needs to be filled, it needs to be filled with people that resonate with me because of
Yes.
who I am, what I do, how I do it, and my own magnificence. Then what I need to do is basically solve this part of my leadership. Because right
Right.
now it is the part that drives the hamster wheel. So
Yes.
yes, I agree. It's not all of you, but it is the part that's kind of locking the whole thing together.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that that's what's landing for you. So anyway, if that feels complete, I'd love
It
for you to just
does.
close us off and let everybody know who to find you, where to find, like who's the best person to find you, where can they find you? Floor is yours for that.
Yeah. So the best person to find us is if you are a professional service provider, consultant, or coach who is making multiple six and seven figures, please reach out to us. You can find us across social media. Our handle is Your Admin Expert across Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And you can also visit our website at yourvirtualadminexpert.com.
Love it. Well, as always, we'll include that in the show notes. But Gwendolyn, thank you very much for coming on, being visible,
Yes.
being witnessed, all of the things. And for everybody else listening, we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for the invite.